Welcome to Wholesale Change, the webcast and podcast from Distribution Strategy Group, where we provide thought leadership for wholesale change agents like you. If you're on this call, you probably are a wholesale change agent, so we're glad to have you on board. My name is Ian Heller. I'll be your co-host today. I'm the co-founder and co-owner of Distribution Strategy Group, and I'll be joined today by my business partner, the ace of analytics, the doctor of distribution, Jonathan Bine, PhD, and I'm pleased to announce that we have a guest today. Please welcome to the show. I'd like to welcome to the show, Jason Hine. This is his bio here. He's been at McMaster-Carr, Amazon Business, some software companies, and today he is the principal B2B visionary. That's one hell of a title at Bloomreach, which helps companies around the world grow online revenue by creating, personalizing, and scaling premium commerce experiences for customers across every touch point. So I'd like to get some information about what Bloomreach does and what you do there, Jason. But first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for giving us the time today. We really appreciate it. And Jonathan and I are very excited to have you here. I think, Jonathan, you can confirm that, right?
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to be with Ian Stellar Heller.
You know, that's like the only word that rhymes with Heller. So I'm always going to be ahead of you when it comes to, you know, flattering.
Feller.
Yeah. Sarah Michelle Gellar.
I get that one all the time.
I bet you do.
Yeah. And then, yeah, of course, go ahead.
You get mixed up in restaurants all the time, I'm sure.
Oh man, it's
confused the two of you.
They do, right? But I have Bine and Hine, so it's it's like Heller, Bine, and Hine. It sounds like a law firm.
It does.
Not a reputable one either.
No, right up there with Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe.
So, Jason, why don't you give us a quick update on what you do? You know, what does Bloomreach do, and what do you do? And then we'll jump into into today's conversation.
Yeah, so Bloomreach is we're a platform company, and lots of distributors out there have made e-commerce. Right, they've got websites, they are up and running, but they're not necessarily running all that well. So what Bloomreach does is we provide some pieces and some modules to help really accelerate the discovery experience on your site. So we don't make e-commerce, but we make your e-commerce work, is the way that I talk about it. If your search isn't working terribly well, or if you're jealous of how some sites can actually merchandise product and make recommendations, oh, hey, you've got this product here, you should think about this product. We have little modules of software that can layer on top of the software that you already have. So the e-commerce platforms, we can integrate with PIMs, because it's all a what's called a headless software approach. So it just plugs into the software you have to get the data and the functionality that you don't have.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we have no financial arrangement with Bloomreach. They aren't sponsoring
Correct.
the show. So we have Jason on because he's one of the world's leading product data experts. And I know one of the points you're going to make on this show is that this is actually an area where distributors can be way ahead of marketplaces. Marketplaces have everything from search problems to legal liability issues because of product data. And I don't want to get into that right this second, but this is an area where distributors can truly differentiate from, you know, even strong e-commerce companies, the strongest e-commerce companies like Amazon and Walmart, right?
Agreed. Yeah, it is in a world where everybody seems to be desperate to look for true defensible competitive advantage. Yes. Product data does represent one area where you can create a moat against Amazon. And you know me, Ian, I hate using that term when it comes to Amazon, right? Because, you know, typically it's hard to beat them back, but this is an area where they've got some real challenges.
All right, good. Well, let's jump into it. I think this is these are all your slides, Jason. So you want to this is provocative, right? Well, I mean, I guess it's logical, right? Physical comparisons are impossible or impractical in the digital realm. So why don't you go into this for us?
Yeah, it's something that I think people have to think about because people don't think about it. You think about the experience of going to of being able to look at product samples in person, right? When you go to a brick and mortar, like when you go to a branch or you're at the counter and they've got some stuff up front, you can pick up and hold these two things in your hands. And there's a lot of comparison that happens subconsciously. Like you can tell what one of them feels heavier, or oh man, this is a little bit center of gravity is a little weird here. Those kinds of comparisons, that very subtle, nuanced, kind of perceived and felt difference,
Yes.
cannot be experienced online. So you have to think about ways to account for those differences in a way that can be viewable and comparable by a user online. So there's a lot of, when we talk about product data, a lot of what we are doing, yes, there are certain things that are everybody knows, right? The brand, the part number, a description, but you also need to think about, dimensions, weight, maximum speeds, minimum and maximum operating temperature, compatible materials.
Right.
All of these things that are important to drive discovery and to help the user narrow down and refine everything that you sell into a logical consideration set.
Yeah, so I have a question for you then, because it seemed to me that the way Amazon addressed that lack of physical comparison ability was by doing a fantastic job gathering customer reviews, right? Because nobody, it's like, I remember back in the old days when I would read expert reviews of printers, and it would be some writer at CNET.
Yes.
And for him, setting up that HP printer was a breeze because he was an expert, right? For me, it was like absolutely impossible. I could not figure out how to make this printer work, even though I'm, I would say reasonably technical. But then you would read the user reviews, and the users who were more like me than the expert writer would say, man, this thing's a pain in the ass to set up, right? And I would go, well, I don't think I want that product then, right? And then, so Amazon really turned that into a differentiator. The problem is there's so many fake reviews on there now that they've kind of lost credibility, which is, I think, a huge erosion of the foundation of their credibility. And then the other problem is that they sell advertising, so the recommended products are no longer based on, or not at least solely on, customer reviews. I mean, anybody can take a crappy product and pitch it right at the top. And it seems like this whole advertising approach that they've got really runs counter to their self-proclaimed customer obsession. So those two advantages that they had, I feel like they're selling them in order to get advertising money back.
Yeah, I think that I think we're still waiting for the next generation of review theory, right? Okay. I think they have done some interesting things. So there are tools that you can use, little kind of, there's a plugin for Chrome, for example, called Fake Spot, right, which does a really nice job of kind of flagging, hey, these SKUs, looks like a lot of their reviews are probably not real. And it gives you a grade, A to F, on how genuine you should view that 4-star rating. I think, though, the nuance with B2B types of products on Amazon and dealing with their reviews is that, unlike consumer goods, where each good is designed for pretty much to be used by all consumers for the same thing,
right?
In B2B, a lot of the products that we sell are designed to have very different applications for different markets, for different industries, and for different types of users. Right. So just because I happen to be using a particular brand of 4-flute roughing end mill for titanium, and just because it happens to work for me in an aerospace application, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work well for just a machine shop that's working in Inconel for the first time.
Yeah, that's a really good point that I hadn't thought about. But I will say, if it was that easy to spot the fake reviews, or at least rate them, Amazon could develop that in a heartbeat. And the fact that they haven't sends a message. Right?
Well, I think
a colleague of mine at the University of Colorado has actually done research on the level of fake reviews, and they are pervasive. And
yeah.
So
well, it's a whole industry in China, right? I mean, the fact that the brushing news, like those of us who have worked with Amazon for a long time, brushing is like the sun coming up in the morning. Like it's something that we've known about for years.
What's brushing? So
there was this article making rounds talking about people receiving these mysterious seed packets directly from China.
Yeah, I saw that. Right.
So what that is it's a concept called brushing, where the seller just finds somebody's address in a public record somewhere, and then they create a fake order for that product, and all they have to do is ship you something that has about the same weight, and they can then post as that person as a confirmed customer,
as a verified purchaser.
A verified purchase, right?
Right.
So they basically China just sends us a bunch of garbage because it's super cheap because of
Right.
the way postal subsidies work to send stuff from China directly to the US.
Right.
And so boom, costs them almost nothing, but they get a confirmed, a verified purchase review, which is worth more.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, let's get back to your slide. But I think that whole, I think they're causing themselves some potential long-term damage. I mean, not that it's showing up in the performance in the short term, but
They've been doing that for a while though.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, fair
exactly
enough.
what
Right.
we're about to talk about.
Right.
So, I mean, so back to the sort of key point, the physical comparisons are impossible or impractical. I was involved in the late 90s in a B2C site called sneakers.net. We had Hank Aaron and Jimmy Connors. It was kind of a competitor to Gretzky, Elway, and Jordan. But if you think about it, in the 90s, we didn't really have good ways to buy shoes online. It was a bad idea.
Right.
I can rebuy shoes. I mean, I have a set of go-to shoes that I buy. In the industrial world, I think one of the ones that really struck my interest or curiosity was the whole flooring and tiling world. If you look at a lot of the construction world, it's not visible to the end customer. I mean, maybe some of the plumbing stuff is, most of the electrical stuff is not, drywall's not, blah, 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 blah. But, the flooring and the tiling stuff, I mean, that's really like a consumer product. And it's tricky to buy online.
Yeah. Because so much of the key there, Jonathan, is the difference between what are the attributes, what are the features that drive differentiation, and are they objective or are they subjective?
Right.
Is this attribute, is this feature something where it is a measurable, like maximum speeds and maximum temperatures, or is it like a style thing
Or a color.
or
which is prone to color correction problems, right?
Exactly right. Like the way that color displays on my screen may not be what it looks like in real life.
Yeah.
And that's very challenging to deal with on a product data, especially for certain products where style becomes a part of it.
You look very purple today, by the way, Jason.
Hey, thank you. It's actually blue. I think it's probably the navy blue background.
Yeah. Now this from the guy in Boulder, where you're only allowed to wear running shoes or Birkenstocks. So there's not a style problem if you live in Boulder.
I'm in Seattle. We are a hardcore socks and sandals community. So.
Oh man. Okay. All right. What else do you want to say about this particular slide? So for for the podcast listeners, what this slide says is, in digital, physical comparisons are impossible or impractical. Then the sub bullets are, there must be an accounting of all the product types you want to be offered, and implicit characteristics must be made explicit through comprehensive lists of attributes. Anything else you want to stress on here, Jason?
No, I mean, it's that those are the two big parts of what we call a data standard. So,
all right, we'll go to the next page, and this says, how good is your content? And so the question is actually about answering one question: do users think my content is any good? It's not. So even if you have some objective measurement, because I see these, measurements of full attribution, right? Distributors say, I've got 50,000 SKUs and I'm up to 80% full attribution. But that doesn't mean, 0 of those products might actually be acceptable to the user depending on how you define your attribution requirements, right?
Yes. I could populate a lot of those fields with NA and boost my metric, but it's not meaningful to the customer.
Right.
That question of, this is when you think about a content strategy or a digital strategy, this is the core question to ask yourself is, do my users think that my content is any good? Doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the users think. They are the ones that are using this to make a purchasing decision. So, but to break that down even more, you have to ask yourself, well, who is the user? What do I mean by content? Content's a bit of a loaded term.
Sure.
What does it mean for that content to be good? And what does it mean for that content to be mine? Because in this space, there's a lot of content kind of sloshing around. Like some of it, manufacturers are putting stuff in, and marketplaces are putting stuff in, and data pools are putting stuff in, and companies are also putting their own in. So there's just these are really challenging questions, and a lot of companies just try to jump into e-commerce and gather a bunch of data, just like you were saying, without really thinking about, all right, well, who am I writing this for? And what kind of content do we need to account for? How do I define what good is? And then how do I decide which of this content I'm just going to get from somebody else and which of it I'm going to create myself?
Yeah. I know there's another product data guy I work with named John Walker. He was a Granger guy for a long time. And he
Yeah.
says you should manage your product data with the same rigor that you manage your inventory. And
Oh,
as you think about that, it's like, okay, look, if you're managing your inventory well, it's because it's turning, right? I mean, it's not just because you have these internal measurements about completeness of line, but if you look at the product data measurements, they're all internal, right? It's like, what's my level of attribution? What's my taxonomy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's no measurement from the customer to say whether or not any of that is any good. And in inventory, you can say, I mean, if you wanted to, you could do the same lousy measurements for inventory that you do for a lot of people do for product data. How many SKUs do I have? How complete is my line? How many categories do I have? And if all that stuff sits idle in your warehouse, you have a terrible inventory management system, even if it's complete by your internal standards.
Right.
But with this product data, there's no external measurement. I mean, are you out there asking customers, do we have the right data? Is it working for you? Can you select the product properly? But most of the product data standards I've seen distributors operate are about this internal stuff. None of it's from the point of view of the customer. Is there anybody out there who's actually getting that customer data in a structured, ongoing basis that you know of?
Well, I mean, one of the things that you so once you have your site up and running, obviously you want to keep a very close eye on your, click path metrics, your heat maps. You want to see like, where are customers going, and really boil it down to a step-by-step. You want to measure their discovery path. And anytime that those discovery paths break, that's a signal that there's something wrong about that component, either that landing page or those search results or that detail page, that's causing them to question the information that you are presenting them. And that could be, I'm not presenting enough information, I'm not presenting the right information, or I'm not presenting the right information in a way that they can understand.
Got it. Right.
So this is where we get into this idea of what's called, either a data model, or I call it a data standard, or sometimes a data rule book. You as an organization have to design and document what does good content look like for every category of product that you sell, right? You have to say, these are the features we need to account for end mills. These are the features we need to document for programmable logic controllers. These are the features we need to document for planetary gearboxes. And you have to do that. And it sounds like a lot of work, and it is a lot of work. There are ways of kind of mitigating that, but once you have that standard defined, the really glorious thing about it is that you can then hand that standard off to others for them. So whether it's handing it off to your vendors and saying, like, this is the format that we needed the data in. If you're working with, maybe you've got some freelance folks, like some help on Fiverr or Upwork that are doing some data gathering. You can say, hey, I need you to go to this site and pull all the data down. Here's the standard you need to make it to.
Yeah, right.
It takes all of that work of a lot of times that work happens based on experience and opinion, right? And the four of us here, we may have very different ideas about what matters for adhesives, but if we have a standard, then we're suddenly we all know what to go look for. We know what values they should be. We know how it should be spelled. We know how the terminology should be defined, and it's just so much more efficient to go out and do the work.
Yeah, right. And by the way, when you mentioned the four of us, people don't know that Jason Capshaw, our producer, is in the background lurking and listening to everything. But he's also an e-commerce expert. So, yeah, I mean, I think, this notion of having standards is important. I think, for a lot of distributors, they're so early on their path that they really don't know how to get started, right? I mean, and I'll tell you a quick anecdote. When I got to Whitecap, we didn't have a product database. All right. And so we needed one in marketing, but we had a catalog that a bunch of production designers had put together by going to manufacturers' websites and just building these blocks out with tables and images and copy and everything else. And they manually cobbled together this 800-page catalog, right? Which is not how you do catalogs. I mean, the way you do, not that anybody does them anymore, but the way you used to do print catalogs is you had a big product database and you pull it into Pages.
Yeah.
And so what we did though is we sent that catalog over to India. I can't remember if it was Utopia or Unilog or somebody like that, but they actually disassembled those PDFs into a product database. So we did it the reverse. I mean, arguably the wrong way, but also the only way we could get it done. And so I think, being creative about, hey, what are the resources that we have? Can we get a bunch of stuff from suppliers? I'm a big believer in pushing product data off to suppliers and enforcing it, having very, very clear standards, but enforcing it so that they build it. And people get frustrated because they're like, well, the images aren't up to standard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, they have the data.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you can live with that. Right.
Yeah, I strongly encourage people to not try to boil the ocean when it comes to product data.
Yep.
When we were starting at Amazon, we made that mistake. We actually went and I had built out a full content team. We had our own photo studio. We had a team of writers that were writing copy for every SKU that we were going to load into the system. And what we learned from that is that, I mean, it's not cheap to build custom content. I mean, even if you offshore it to India, where it's that has some of its own. India is very good at doing some things. There's some things it's not so good at doing.
We had an image for concrete mortar sent back to us that was an artillery mortar.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but it's and the standards can help with that, but it really is, the way that I talk about it now is these four concepts of who's the user, what's the content, what's good, and what's mine. You can use this to kind of create accountability matrices to decide where to invest in the future. So you kind of start off with, you just need a baseline of product data that's pretty good. It's the data you get from your suppliers. It might not be really consistent. There might be some pieces missing, but you know what? If that's loaded onto SKUs that aren't getting any hits, does it matter?
No.
Not really.
No.
So what you do is you then kind of redirect your strategy to be one where you follow your customers. As you tweak and refine your discovery process, you'll start to see more SKUs start to get activity. And you just then have to deploy a fast follow approach. Oh, somebody looked at this page for the first time. Quick, let's get an image up. Quick.
But I get it, but let me ask you this, because, for all the limitations in data that the big platforms have, like Amazon, the reality is that they're able to use AI to match, pixels and images or voice audio files down to specific products. I mean, I can use my smartphone in the Amazon app and point the camera at something or speak into it and describe it, and it can match to that SKU on Amazon. I mean, it's pretty astonishing technology. So how do they do that? Go ahead.
Well, if you have a part number, sure. I think this is
no. I'm talking about without a part number. I mean, I can point this at. I got a can of La Croix on my desk. I can point the camera at it.
Yeah, consumer goods. That works great. Yeah. Try doing that on a socket head cap screw. Try doing it on an end belt. Believe me, I've tried. I've tested this.
Got it. Yeah.
And the hard thing about it is it's interesting because the company that Amazon bought to launch that product used to have, if I remember right, when they launched, they had this feature where you could just put a quarter next to something or a penny.
I remember that for fasteners.
So that to give it a sense of size. And I thought that was a really interesting approach. It doesn't seem like that's still functional. I'm assuming because they realize, well, crap, we're becoming global, and like, well, now we have to not just recognize the item, we have to recognize the coin and whether it's heads or tails, and what happens if it's in India and somebody's got an RMB.
Right. I wondered why they stopped doing that, or at least that was my impression. Maybe they haven't stopped, but to me, my impression was that they stopped, and that's probably why.
Yeah, it is, because in consumer goods, remember, the way products look are designed to be very different because they're designed to target to consumers who are very visual. But in B2B, we have so many product types that are where the variances between any two SKUs are so nuanced.
Yes.
That at least from what I've seen, the Amazon voice and image search is still a little bit behind the curve.
I mean, it's AI, right? So it'll get better on its own over time, but it's got a ways to go.
It is. I think it'll be, it's interesting to think about where I could. I mean, obviously, I work for a company that deploys AI aggressively right
Sure.
now, and it's been a learning experience for me about what AI can and can't do. But
Yeah.
but anyway, so
All right.
you know, the real big thing is set up some when you're thinking about your product data, try to establish some rules for what it should look like up front. And if you go to the next slide here, you'll see there are kind of four components, four elements of a data standard
Right.
where it starts with. So the first is your list of product categories.
Right.
You want to make sure that in your list of categories, you have, you know, a place for everything and everything in its place.
Yep,
So you want to
sure.
make sure that there is a category where every single one of the things that you sell can be put where it's going to be stored with all of the same things, not like a jumble, not like a junk drawer. But you also want to make sure there's only one place. Because the moment we've all had that experience where we're shopping on a website and it turns out there's really two places where the things we're looking for are stored. So we have to kind of bounce between the two in order to compare. That's really annoying. Once you have those groups defined, then for each one of those groups, as we discussed, you have to lay out what are all of the attributes, those things, both the ones that are explicit and the ones that are sort of implicit, and document all of them. If you do that up front and you collect all that information to begin with, it really cuts back the rework time. It's tempting to say, oh, we'll go back and get that data later. One, you won't. And two, when you do, it's going to be really inconsistent. So just try to do the right thing up front and at least know what you're looking for. Whether your suppliers can actually give that to you, that's fine. If it's the base level and nobody's seeing it, that's okay. But then as those things bubble up and as traffic activity starts to come, that's where you start to deploy that attribution rule book and say, no, we need to enforce this a little bit. We're actually getting eyeballs. So
when distributors get into this process really for the first time, and I hate to say it, but a lot of distributors are there right now, right?
Yep.
I mean, should they hire somebody who actually knows something about product data? And I know you don't do this consulting, and neither do we. So this is not a pitch for business.
Right.
This is not a subtle pitch for business of any kind.
Yep.
But should they hire somebody who, can help them make sure that they've established the right taxonomy, attribution, relationships, and enrichments?
Yeah. A lot of people have product experts on staff, but they don't have information architecture people on staff.
It's not the same thing at all.
It is very different. And you can, the wonderful thing about working with some of those companies, and there are some really good ones out there, is they get you to the point where you kind of are conversational about it, so that then going forward, you at least have a sense of what the best practices are that you need to employ. You don't need to have a PhD in information architecture on staff. But you just need somebody that understands, mutual exclusivity is important. Collectively exhaustive, it's important.
Right.
Those sorts of and that's actually what these firms will do. They'll come in, they'll help you design the taxonomy, and then make sure that they help you understand, why have we built this like this? So that going forward, you don't inadvertently break it and violate best practice because you decide to make a change going forward.
All right. So I don't want to put you on the spot. So if you don't want to answer this, you don't have to, but can you name 2 or 3 firms that do that kind of work, or individual consultants?
Oh, sure. I mean, I used to work at Early Information Science. I think they are really, really strong at doing information. That's really what they do, is information architecture.
EARLEY, is that right?
Correct. Or EIA. Yeah, it's early.com. They do a nice job. I think that, and then before that, I actually did this kind of work when I was at Codified. So
sure, I've heard of them.
They do that kind of work as well. Honestly, a lot of the service, the systems integrators that do implementation of PIM software, oftentimes will have people on staff that can do this work. So I know Gorilla Group has people who do it. Shift 7 out of Chicago.
So if you hire once you put a PIM in place, so that might be Stebo or
Interworks or Informatica, InRiver, any of those.
Right.
Agility.
Right. So if you want, so they will. Do they do that work themselves, or they typically bring in someone to help you do it?
They generally, if you go to a PIM company, they will usually bring in a partner to do the implementation. Honestly, if you, in my experience, when you work with a PIM company and you insist on having one of their people as your implementer, you usually end up with a worse experience.
Okay.
Not because they're not good at it, but
Right.
they don't have enough of those people left anymore. They've really
Right.
tried to send that work to the SIs because they're the ones that are really, really good at it.
And if you are, let's say that you're on this, you're listening to this conversation right now, and you're pretty sophisticated, right? So you've built out your PIM and you've got a good taxonomy and data architecture, but you want to be better at it. Is that something that people do internally,
Yeah.
or okay? And so what are the
if they have some, so it kind of depends on the metrics that they have.
Right.
So one of the
how do you know
things-
that you need? How do you know if you need to improve?
How do you know you need to improve? Because you've invested all this money in a taxonomy and you're not getting the results, right?
Yeah,
So
my observation about where the industry is, I think we talked about this prior to the show, is that we're kind of at data 1.0 or maybe data 0.9. Data 1.0 or 0.9, whatever you want to call it, has been driven by a lot of these aggregate initiatives, affiliated distributors, IMARC and similar associations, group initiatives, which get the first two parts of your framework here in quantity, in volume,
yes,
right?
Yep.
And to get to data 2.0, we're going to need better information about relationships so that we can do, what's your word for personalization? You don't like that word personalization.
Oh, contextual targeting is what I use. Yes.
So if we want to do contextual targeting, we got to have the information about relationships and enrichments. And that doesn't tend to come from most of these big group initiatives. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, they do. Because honestly, the relationships, one of the things that I've learned coming to Bloomreach is relationships are actually something that's really, really helped. You get a big, heavy lift from AI and machine learning. It is trying to manually map, this works with this works with this, is almost impossible, especially for distributors, because distributors have to actually account for relationships across brands. Right? If I'm a manufacturer, it's pretty easy for me to say, yeah, this is my widget, this is the replacement part, this is the accessory.
Got it. Right.
But I manufacture all of those. But distributors, it's a little bit more of an art because you may have multiple brands of adhesives that you can use. So that's where machine learning can, if you have your data structured right, can really do a lot to make that easier long term.
All right. Let's talk about enrichments. This is, say, enrichment is how your products are described, but I'm assuming this goes beyond just sort of specific technical data.
Yeah. So it's enrichments so everything. So the attribution and the relationships are what I call discovery content. This is the content that you use to drive keyword search, faceted search, right? The ability to refine down by attributes. The order in which things are displayed for search results. But enrichments, this is what I call conversion content. I've gotten to a product that might be the right thing. What are the pieces of content that I need to be convinced this is the right thing? So this is things like images, especially secondary images, things that don't display on the search results page, long form copy. So marketing copy or editorial or what we call romance copy in the industry. Also things like CAD files, MSDSs, instruction manuals, any sort of training materials that you've put together around the product. It's the thing that takes the user from, that might be right, to, yeah, that's what I need. So they buy with confidence.
That's interesting you talk about manuals, because I have increasingly found myself looking at manuals to see how stuff gets assembled or installed or configured, because a lot of times that's where you really understand, first of all, it's within your skill set. And secondly, if you want to do all that work, and third, if you need anything else to do it with.
That's a great point.
Are you resorting to maps as well, Ian?
To maps?
Yeah, manuals and maps. It's a gender specific thing, right?
No, I don't use maps.
We don't like to read the manual. We don't like to look at maps.
Yeah,
oh, I
right.
get it. I've never had any reservation about doing either one. I know what I am. But I think so you were saying about manuals, you think that's
it is, because I think actually it's funny. I got a bike yesterday that I was actually assembling in my garage, and it did not come with an assembly manual. The assembly manual was, there was a YouTube video that I could go and watch, or I could download the PDF. And now if I had downloaded the PDF and read that beforehand, and maybe I would have bought a different bike, but it was very informative. But but enrichments are a little bit different, because while, so taxonomy, attribution, and relationships are something that you do at scale, right? Taxonomy and attribution, you want to have levels of quality, like kind of, my bronze, silver, gold, depending on how important that SKU is to my business, I'm going to invest in more and better quality and more. I'm going to make that content more mine, as opposed to just recycling what I'm provided. But with enrichments, the way that you have to define what good is a little bit different. You might have to create a style guide around copy. What are our terms that we use? What do we don't use? If you create style guides around images, how are we going to shoot end mills? How are we going to shoot gloves? How are we going to shoot welding goggles? You want to have those standards, again, because when you hire out somebody to do this, right? If you hire a freelance copywriter to write you copy, here's the style guide. That ensures that you're getting a consistent voice on your highest priority products that sounds, the way that you want to sound. Do you want to be authoritative? Do you want to be friendly? Do you want to be, all of that work is sort of defined and captured in these style guides. But again, you don't necessarily, unlike attribution, where you do want to go through and define some rules and standards on everything you sell, enrichments, you want to follow the business, because that sort of work tends to be more expensive. And that's where, if you try to do that on everything like I did when I was at Amazon, you spend a lot of money and don't really get a lot of result all the time.
Right. Sorry, I went the wrong way. All right. This is, so this is your next slide. And this is,
it's talking about this is what goes into the first two categories, the big two, right? Taxonomy and attribution is what this is one here is about taxonomy.
Right.
So what is in a taxonomy element of a data standard? One is you have to have the list of all the categories you're going to sell in a hierarchy. And it's usually, for those of you who remember, your 7th grade life sciences, remember, the species, genus, family, like the whole, the scientific naming conventions. You make one of those for the products that you sell. So at a high level, it might be fasteners. And then below that, you might have, I've got, thread-driven fasteners and non-driven fasteners, or threaded and non-threaded. And then within threaded, I might have machine screws and bolts and socketed cap screws. And then under machine screws, I might have, pan head and round head. And until you get down to like individual types of products that represent the things that people actually buy. So that hierarchy becomes really important.
Yeah, I mean, this is so, I'm assuming that what you're giving us is sort of a high level look at this. And yet this is a lot more in depth than I think a lot of people are thinking about their data, right?
Yep.
So, to me, it just reinforces the need that you need to, if you get this wrong to begin with, my word, the effort to undo it and reclassify it, it's got to be harder to fix it than do it the first time.
In fact, it's so impossible that Amazon can't do it now.
So what do you mean?
This is the opportunity.
Right.
Amazon has so many products that were built with they don't really have a data standard for the products that you load. Is there a template that you have to use to load product onto Vendors and Seller Central? Yes, there is.
I've seen it. It's pretty bare bones.
It's actually, for some of them, they have a lot of columns, but they don't make very many of them required.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Okay, got it.
Because what they want to do is they want to load as much selection as possible. To them, good customer experience. You look at their Amazon flywheel drawing the napkin drawing that Jeff did.
Sure.
The things that drive the flywheel are more selection and lower prices.
Right.
Well, we're distributors, and we know that just adding more selection and having lower prices is not how. If there's a distributor out there today where that's their go-to-market value, they're going to be out of business here in a couple weeks.
Well, but even Amazon seems to have backed away from lower prices. I mean, it seems like assortment has become the driver. The driver, right? I mean,
well, they back off. They still value lower price. I mean, one of the biggest things in terms of who wins the buy box is who has the lowest price. I mean, it is still a factor, but they're leaning on their sellers to handle price now.
Yeah, I saw, so I bought a generator from Harbor Freight, which will probably make everybody on this call hang up immediately. But it was $700, right? And so just for fun, I checked it out at Amazon. There were sellers on there selling that exact same product, which is a Harbor Freight private label product for $2,000.
Yeah. There are companies that have resold Ikea furniture on Amazon. Again, they buy it retail, double the price, and relist it because they know that there are people out there in the world who they're not in driving distance to an Ikea, and Ikea historically had not shipped product.
But isn't that going to backfire eventually? I mean, because there's this ongoing perception that Amazon is a good place to get a good value, right? And that's becoming increasingly less true in my experience. In fact, Darren, a friend of the company, sent in a statement. It says they actually don't buy it until they sell it. It's Amazon product arbitrage. So that's kind of interesting. I had never thought about that, Darren. So thanks for that contribution. So people are just taking products from other retailers, posting them on Amazon at higher prices, and then if they sell it, they buy it. I mean,
put a long lead time on it. That helps.
But isn't that going to over time? It's really hard to predict any doom and gloom about Amazon at the rate they're growing, right? But I mean, that can't be good in the long run.
Amazon is a great place to buy product. It's a terrible place to find product.
Yeah.
I think that's really what they're relying on over the next couple of years. They want to be a procurement system. You look at the features and functionality that they're adding to the Amazon Business Platform, right? Approvals and like the sort of all the metrics. I think it's not unrealistic to imagine, Amazon really aggressively moving into that space more, especially with, hey, if I could get a procurement system that I didn't have to install any systems or any software on, and I could just use it on a website.
That's what they're doing.
That's absolutely.
They're pitching Amazon. I mean, my understanding is they're pitching Amazon Business as an alternative to an e-procurement system. Maybe not for gigantic companies, but for small and mid-sized businesses. They've got all that approval and routing and analytics on purchasing and everything else. So I think they are pitching it that way.
And think of and the ability then. So now what we've done is we've given Amazon then a peek behind the curtain in terms of how B2B internal procurement works.
Right.
You're right. They're giving you a free software. Well, anytime software is free, you're not the buyer. You're the product.
Right.
So
and if you look at their customer advisors, which is their name for a sales rep, who in Amazon Business, a lot of them come out of industrial distribution. I mean, you went there from McMaster-Carr, right? There are people they're customer advisors who came from Grainger and Fastenal. I mean, they've built a lot of expertise, clearly to pursue this type of e-procurement.
Well, and because I think that's a tacit recognition of the fact that they know their data is now so bad that they can't drive a good discovery experience with it.
Yeah.
So what they want you to do is, if you do browse, then you get redirected to all of these advertisers. Right. If you just search with a part number, that's a little bit more of a sniper shot. So it's I think that the sales reps is an effort to try to help bridge those gaps, especially for larger customers.
Okay, so let's talk about attribution elements.
Yeah.
So we talked about taxonomy first, right?
Yep.
And attribution now. So give us the thumbnail overview of attribution.
Right. So for every feature that your customers use to tell the difference between any two things, any two SKUs, you want to write down what are those features, figure out what the names of those features are going to be. How are we going to talk about size? Right? Size, or my favorite, type. Think about all the different definitions that the word type or style has in industrial products.
Sure.
So you want to actually, document for each product that, well, if I have style in end mills, well, what does style refer to? Is it roughing versus finishing versus semi-finishing? Is it, you just have to write that down and define it so that when you give it to people to do the work, they know what you mean. Also the metadata about it. So what is the attribute? A numeric field? Is it an integer? Can you have decimal points or not? Is it characters? Is it what's called a list of values? So should it be, is there only 5 things that this could be? And it needs to be like a drop down menu as opposed to being able to freeform type. Units of measure is a big one. We've all had that experience of shopping on Amazon and seeing different values in the refinement for 1 inch, 1 inches, 1.0 inches, 1.0 exclamation, you know, quotation mark, 2.54 centimeters, right? It's all the same thing, but you really want to consolidate all those into a single unit. So your units of measure, like what are the units of measure you are going to accept and how are you going to format them? Also the how they're going to be prioritized. So like we said, we're not going to boil the ocean. We don't necessarily, we need to figure out if we know there are 10 attributes that are meaningful, but these are the 4 that really matter. Okay, then we'll accept a contribution from somebody sending us data that only has those 4. And maybe once the SKU kind of picks up, we'll go back and get the other 6. But just knowing in how important are they, because not every attribute is the same to a user. And then finally, the use. Is this an attribute that we're going to use for keyword search? Are we going to use it for faceted search and attribute, you know, filter by attributes? All of these things are the key things to again, define, but then to document, write it down, have it in some place that you can store.
Okay, great. And so let's talk about challenges of data standards quickly. We're starting to run out of time.
Yeah.
So
obviously, once you have it done, you're not done. Content is a program, not a project. Just because you have the data standard built doesn't mean that it's going to stay relevant. So obviously, most distributors, you know, their selection is a little dynamic. You may decide, hey, I'm going to add safety to my line because who doesn't want to sell safety? Well, okay, if you're going to do that, then you have to create, what's your taxonomy look like for safety? What do your attribution look like? New products get launched all the time.
You better update your product liability insurance too if you're going to sell safety. I mean, it's a great category, but there's risk.
Exactly. Maintaining the compliance. So the SKU data coming in, you want to try to deploy what's called a data governance approach or program to make sure that what percentage of the SKUs that I have loaded comply with this standard that I've done. And this is actually where PIMs come in very handy because some of them offer data governance features where you can say, hey, here's my data standard. I'm going to plug it into the PIM. And now the PIM can go out, you know, every day, every week and check to make sure, hey, these are the SKUs that are still in compliance or are not in compliance.
Yeah, sure.
And then obviously the matching of your business metrics to your product metrics, just like what you were talking about earlier, Ian. You know, that's something that can be hard to do, requires some active management. Making sure that you're finding that right balance between the way that we view these products internally and the way that the market views these products. So sometimes if you stay too internally focused and you're not going out regularly and doing market research, hey, what's happening? What's new? What's out there? And making sure that that's being accounted for in your standard, you risk your experience falling behind. And then the last part is obviously we are distributors. We don't make our, you know, most of our product data, especially at that sort of baseline tier. So having good working relationships with your suppliers, whether you're buying from the manufacturer, from a master distributor, or maybe you're getting data from a data pool, you want to have a good working relationship with those people because the better your working relationship is, the more likely you are to get data from them that's more compliant with your standard.
But if you want to differentiate your site in terms of SEO, don't you need to create your own data too?
Yes, but it can be very hard to create data for every SKU that you have.
Oh, I'm not suggesting that. I mean, but you want enough, you know, for the
10%. The core 10%.
So that's the tiering, right? The gold, the bronze, silver, gold. So as a product becomes more important, either it becomes actually more important, meaning we have more customers looking at it or buying it, or it becomes more strategic for you as a business. This is a product we want to sell more of. That's where you invest in raising the bar on quality, enforcing more of that data standard, and doing that over time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
you know,
if we come back to the topic of differentiation, that's an issue for people who are getting data from these aggregate data projects, right? Because now there's 150 people
yeah,
with the same product data that you have.
Yep.
What does the search engine do? It throws up its hands. So you have to
Yeah.
go the extra mile on that 10% of your SKUs that form 90% of your revenue, and to use
Right.
your enrichment.
Right.
So
So it comes, and that's to a certain extent, it relates to maturity, right? Like you said, a lot of distributors are very early in their digital maturity. They're at what we call when I was at B2X, we called it the foundational phase. I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do and to get something up and running before I move into the adoption phase of trying to get my existing customers to buy on my site. Once you get that happening, then you move into a repositioning phase of I'm going to take all this data I'm getting from my current customers who are already loyal. And you know what? It can be a little rough. They'll probably ride along with me because I'm providing a lot of service. But I refine and tweak and adjust my data and my experience so that then I can move into an acquisition phase. Now my website is differentiated enough where I can use it to start to have new customers come to me and say, oh, this experience is really great. I'm going to come here all the time. Most companies right now are in that sort of foundational, maybe into adoption.
All right. So are there distributors that have that next level that you're talking about?
Are moving.
I'm not aware of any. So.
I think that Grainger is doing some really interesting stuff. They had the Gamut test site a year or two ago. They were doing some very interesting things on that platform, and they've shut it down now. I think because they were like, okay, hey, we know this really works, so we're going to try to figure out, and as somebody who, when we built Amazon Supply on a different domain, trying to get traffic to come there is almost impossible. So I think what they're doing is they've learned the value of a data-driven experience, a great customer experience, and they're just looking for ways to kind of figure that out on the main g.com site. I'm going to watch that site over the next year or so, because I think that's going to be they've got a good approach. I think there are other sites, I think, what's the hardware component distributor just out of Chicago? They're based out of Japan, Mizumi. They have got some really interesting product discovery tools on their site. The UI is not always elegant, but it's very powerful. So there are some, and the ones that are coming out and doing this now, I spoke on this recently at B2B Online. We're right on the cusp of what I call a great share swap in industrial distribution, because you have a lot of young buyers coming in, the Gen Zs, who now are like, I have no patience if you're online. There's a McKinsey study that just looked at between 2020 and 2019, the order preferences for digital versus offline are now 2x, because people are like, I can buy online. This works great. I don't have to wait for somebody to come to me. Yeah, I don't get donuts every now and again, but that's fine.
But McKinsey has also said that in the last 6 months, we've seen 10 years worth of e-commerce adoption. So whatever that 2x number was from 2010 to 2019, it's probably doubled.
No, it was 2019 to 2020. That's what they're saying. That was in April.
Oh, got it. Okay.
They compared April 2022, the year before. It's flipping. And so distributors who take this, who get a good, strong foundation, figure out your data standards, it just puts you in a position to start to leapfrog companies and differentiate yourself from the companies that are so big that they can't control and can't tune their data to create a good experience anymore.
All right. So, give us your 3 tips, so give me 3 tips for distributors who are just getting started or whatever. Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 4, and the same number roughly for distributors who want to go to the next level because they've done the easy stuff.
So at the foundation phase, I'd say 1, build your data standard. Get help if you need to. There's people out there who can help you do that.
Most of them do need help.
Most of them do need help. You probably can't do this yourself unless you're going to go out and hire somebody with a background in information architecture.
Right.
Don't
I've seen 0 companies with less than $1 billion in revenue have a meaningful number of SKUs who've been able to do it themselves entirely.
agreed. No, in fact, if anything, they've made it
Me too.
worse
Right.
because and then have to spend even more money to fix it.
Right.
So get your data standard built, get help if you need it, and then put together, keep these challenges in mind, right? Get a data governance, like once you have it built, make sure you're maintaining it. So, have the conversations to make sure that it's being tuned, that you have a metrics program in place on your site to look for where there's opportunities to incrementally invest. This doesn't have to be a massively expensive project. It's just like taking care of your car, right? You buy a car, it's expensive up front. And then you know what? But you do have to put the oil in. You do have to put gas in.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, then you're, replacing an engine block and you're kicking yourself because I didn't want to put in $5 worth of oil.
Right.
Now, if you
And how
are
about the
more advanced, then it's really about that balance, that kind of the latter three here. It's the optimization to your metrics. So the people who are more advanced are really diving deep into the site metrics, doing journey mapping. Where are our customers? It's fixating on what's the customer experience, and trying to get ahead of what customers are going to want in a year or two. This is the thing that Amazon is really good at. They don't look. Amazon does not give. They do not think that any of their competitors matter. They are focused on what they think customers want. Henry Ford had this quote: "If I had asked my customers what they want, they would have said they wanted a faster horse." And that absolutely applies to e-commerce. You've got to be training yourself, have that visionary to look around the corner and say, what's coming? Because we want Amazon to be catching up to us. Not
so how do you do that?
chasing Amazon.
So what is around the corner? Any predictions?
I think AI-driven recommendations is going to be a big thing. It's one of the reasons I came over to Bloomreach, because we've got some things that can kind of do that, but I think AI is going to be a big part of it. Trying to create a digital experience that not only accounts for the product and the product data, but also other areas, customer data and application data. I mean, those are the two contexts that most distributors don't even try to do online, but it is now possible to account for all three of those contexts using the power of AI and machine learning to really let your salespeople focus more on, truly engineered sales where they add the most value for the biggest customers, and have more of your customers solve their own problems with a contextually targeted discovery experience.
All right, great. And so I forgot to put your contact name information on here. I'm sorry about that. Why don't you share your email address?
Sure. It's jason.hein, H-E-I-N, at N as in Nancy, at bloomreach.com. Also available on LinkedIn. Just do a search for me and I come up, and I'm on there pretty regularly. So if anybody,
real quick, give us what are you doing at Bloomreach? I mean, you have an interesting, what's your title again? It's pretty interesting.
I'm a principal strategist or visionary for B2B. So I'm basically, Bloomreach, we've got a 25%, I didn't know this, 25% of all e-commerce in the US and the UK runs on at least one, if not multiple, of the Bloomreach modules. So we've got a ton of data in there. A lot of it is B2B, a lot more of it is B2C, but my job is essentially to come in and help tune the products in the portfolio to really be optimized around B2B, especially kind of these technical products. So it's
and what do B2B customers use? What do B2B customers use? What's the most common use case? Yeah.
So running their on-site search. Most e-commerce platforms, the site search is not very good. Ours is running off of 10 years of training data for B2B. So we actually know what a somebody searches quarter inch 20, SHCS, 316SS, 3-inch LNG, BLK.
Right.
We know that it's a quarter inch thread diameter, 20 thread pitch, 316 stainless steel, socket head cap screw with a 3-inch length, and then you need a bulk pack. Like the
Well,
tool
duh.
is smart enough to know that, obviously.
So Jason, you had described yourself as the product data angel for this show. That begs an obvious question. There's at least one other possible role.
Yeah.
The third, if there's a product data devil, is there a product data god? And we'll
Yeah.
leave it up to our audience.
Oh, there's absolutely, yeah, there's absolutely a product data devil, and it's usually the CFO.
Okay.
Hey, we got to wrap up. So Jonathan and I have recently completed our second paper for the National Association of Wholesaler Distributors. That's available following, if you go to naw.org or follow the link on the right. Our contact information is on the left. Please let us know if we can help you with anything. Jason, this has been absolutely fascinating. You truly are one of the world's leading product data experts, and that was obvious throughout the conversation. Thanks so much for being part of the show today. We really appreciate it. And I hope if there's any way we can return the favor, you will let us know. It's been a delight to work with you. And you too, Jonathan, as always.
Thanks you guys for the opportunity. It was a super fun time. Looking forward to doing it again sometime.
Great. All right, good. Thanks, you guys. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, everyone, for listening in. We appreciate it. Bye now.